Jessica Norwood grew up in Germany. Her family looked into getting a nanny or an au pair, but found disadvantages of the both. It's no wonder so many people, i.e. women, leave work to stay home with their children. Norwood told Marker Watch in an email, it's all excruciatingly expensive. Norwood said her friends who work outside of the home and have young children all face this dilemma. I bet they face a dilemma with these damn student loans too. Anyway, it's a frequent topic of conversation in our group because there is no escaping it. And in most cases, there are no other viable options. The average cost of childcare for two, it says greater in rent in all 50 states, and the average mortgage payment is 45. It's greater than the average mortgage payment in 45 states. It's a new report by the nonprofit Childcare Aware of America. Okay, it's something else. Childcare is considered affordable. One thing too, when they're talking about there aren't that many affordable options. Your parents or grandparents are not just working longer, but having to work longer. On top of that, when it takes a village, you're not growing up around your cousins. Most people, right? You're not growing up around your cousins or your aunts and uncles, right? Or maybe some people not even grow up around your grandparents, so you don't have that not immediate. It's your immediate family, it's your parents' immediate family, right? But that extended family that I would say Gen X and before, so definitely, baby boomers had baby boomers who, people didn't join the military, obviously didn't have this like my parents, but for all my all my aunts and uncles that, stayed at home, or not stayed at home, but stayed in the same hometown, my grandparents and my aunts on both sides watched, a combination of their grandkids, right, and nieces and nephews as far as growing up. My mom did it. Because my mom has such a wide age gap amongst her siblings. So my mom talks about all the time how she was watching her nieces and nephews. That's just how it was. But you have to live around your family for your family to watch your kids, right? I mean, it's only my mom, my dad, and my brother that live here. My wife's family lives in North Carolina, her entire family, and then everyone else in my family lives in North Carolina as well. So it's literally just my parents here. Childcare, that's my parents' decision. My dad was in the military, so I didn't move here. Anyway, childcare is considered affordable if it costs. It's back to the 7% number. That's crazy. 7% of a household income. That household income number, though, is usually not gross. It's net, according to the Department of Health and Human Services. Yet the typical Department of Health and Human Services needs to talk to the Department of Treasury. Yet the typical cost of childcare, for one child, which was $11,582 on average in 2023. So last year, is 10% of income in married households and 32% of income for single parents, according to, I guess, Childcare Aware of America. Childcare Aware of America. That's a crazy acronym. Anyways, the actual expenditure is often higher as the average American family has two children, and most single parent households also have more than one child, since the Bureau data shows. Yeah, I mean, most people have siblings, right? So most households are going to be at least have two kids in them. My goodness. Shout out to single parents out there trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure it out. Some of them figured it out, but my goodness. Financial challenges facing families have impacted some people's decision to have children. This is so true. Well, we talked about this with the student loans, though. All right, remember, people with the most student loan debt are people without kids. All right, so if you want less student loan debt, then have kids, get married and have kids. But married people without kids have the most student loan debt. I have to look at that data. The most people with the most student loan debt are Black women and Black men. But Black people, I believe, are the least married out of the major four, like, race groups. But then, interesting how the data like adds up like that. Anyways, as we wrap up, clicked on the wrong thing here. The reality is that for most families everywhere, childcare is very expensive, and it is a very large part of a family's monthly and yearly budgets. That is true in every region, said Ann Hedgepeth, Chief of Policy and Practice at Childcare Aware of America. There may be different extremes, but childcare prices outpace almost everything else. They childcare and student loans. Shout out to kids, right? Student loans. I mean, the cost of college. Before I read this last paragraph, One other thing, oh my goodness. It's just so much information, and I'm tired. I'm ready to eat my cold stone. But what about the fact that not only people are choosing to have less kids, but they're waiting to have children? One of the ways to decrease your childcare costs is, as far as the concurrency of it, so occurring at the same time, is having one child. So a lot of people either not having children at all, so eliminating childcare costs, or only having one child, which is a handful of my friends. That's something they want to do. I would say I'm thinking crazy hard about this. I would say probably close to if we include my friends who don't have kids, I would say close to 75% of my friends either have one child and have said they're only going to have one child, right? That's their plan, right? I mean, nobody, to my knowledge, no one's got a vasectomy or anything, but they plan on only having one child. I just said that. Watch, if they pop up with kids, my goodness. But they either said they've already had a kid and said they're only going to have one kid, or they're just not. They're probably not going to have any kids at all. But there's only, I would say, a handful of us, including my wife and I, who plan on having two or more kids. It's not that many who already have. I have two sets of friends. They already have two kids. I have another set of friends. Shout out to them. They just had twins so the first time they got pregnant, they had twins. So I guess that's an outlier. So we not count them. But I would say yes, definitely. I forget what the number is as far as how millennials slash Gen Z wanting to have kids slash two or more kids, but I know it's like bordering on that 50% line as far as leaning towards more than 50% not wanting to have kids at all or something like that. So I definitely can speak from that experience. But one thing that what my point I was trying to make was that the numbers do show that people are waiting later to have children. And since I mean just the science, the older women get, I think it's around 30 years old, they have around 10% or so of their eggs. 12%. On average, women have around 120,000 eggs by their 30s, which is about 12%. Yeah, so around 10% or so of their, I'll give you the 12%, right? Let's call it 20, right? They got, 10, 12, 15, 20%, whatever, of their eggs left. Under 50%, though, when they reach their 30s, and I believe 35 is geriatric pregnancy. And so, but then when people talk about the complications you can have during birth, right? All these different type of things. But by having children later, as far as from an age standpoint, as a woman, you're giving, I say giving up, but you no longer have that room as far as from a timeline standpoint of having an age gap in your child to decrease these child care costs, which I'm trying to get to. So they were saying they had children 3 and 4, right? So they're 1 year apart. Well, it's going to be hard to have your kids 4 or 5 years apart in age if you don't have your first kid until you're 32, 33, right? I mean, you ask any OBGYN out there, any, labor and delivery medical professional out there, any doctor and anybody, the recommendation is not, you know, to have your children in your late 30s, 40s, right? There's a handful of women where, shout out to the women out there who just, give birth because they're just, they just got, they're the natural talents at it, right? But it's not like the medicine is out there, the data is out there in the medical field to have women give birth in their late 30s and 40s. Not that it can't be done. I know women who have geriatric pregnancy as far as 35 who have children in 30s and fine, but you give up that room from a medical or science point of view of having that gap, as far as your children. I mean, they're going to tell you now. Some of them it is, a little bit of fear porn, right? Where they're just scaring. They're not say scaring you, but then you're not failing any tests. They're just saying because of your age, you're high risk, right? But you do. I mean, at some point in time, you got to listen to the data as far as that's out there, and you have to be mindful of that. And especially, I mean, your first kid, right? I mean, you can't. And a lot of, ooh, you get so much stuff. You can look at birth control, and it's coming out more and more as far as infertility, and it's so unfortunate. I've seen the amount of I'm gonna say this because they posted it publicly on Facebook, but girls that I went to high school with who are now in 30, 31, and I'm thinking like they've been married for some years, right? And you don't want to speak infertility, miscarriages on people. But it's just like, y'all been married for a while, and I'm like, I'm surprised you're having kids. And once they finally do give birth and their child gets here, they post about how that they've had, struggles getting pregnant or multiple, miscarriages. And then you see the data coming out in relation to some, or if not, I won't say all, but some of the birth control out there, and that it can cause complications or infertility. And so if you've been on birth control, which a lot of women have since what, seventh, eighth grade, middle school. I mean, I don't know, middle school girls are starting their cycle. So if you've been on your period and been on birth control since you've been on your period since you started your cycle, since you're 13 years old. I mean, and you're still on it in your 30s, that's 20 years.